Warning. The average cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver is so high, even if someone who is working at minimum wage full-time was having their transit paid for, all of their food paid for, their hobbies or whatever else they need paid for, they would not be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment from their full-time minimum wage job. So just to be like fully clear here, if 100% of a full-time minimum wage worker's job was going towards their rent, that income would be insufficient to pay the average rent in Vancouver right now. And that's only rent. That's not...
Yeah, it's not clothing. It's not food. It's not transportation. It's not entertainment. It's not anything else. Like just rent. Just rent. It's not like, oh, the minimum wage isn't a living wage. It's not enough to live
on. It's, yeah, like...
it's just not even enough to pay
After I pay
rent.
my rent, I've got almost nothing left. No, it's after you pay your rent, you've actually incurred debt because the cost of rent is higher than the total amount of money you'd be getting at minimum wage. Warning.
Warning.
I'm wrong, you're wrong, he's wrong, she's wrong, they're wrong, we're wrong, you're wrong, I am wrong, we are wrong, seriously wrong.
Welcome back to the Seriously Wrong podcast. I'm Shawn, and this is Aaron.
Hey.
Yeah, so we do this show every week out of Vancouver, which is a major city in Canada, if you're not aware.
If you didn't know. We don't often talk about Vancouver stuff. We tend to jump all over the place. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a very Vancouver-focused episode. So anyone looking for a window into the wonderful world of Vancouver, British Columbia, this is it. This is for you.
We've got an awesome interview today with Swanson, a longtime anti-poverty activist in Vancouver. She's pretty well known around the downtown east side, the poorest postal code in Canada. Also the postal code now with the most bars of any postal code in Canada because of gentrification. And she's actually running for city council right now in Vancouver. We got a by-election that wraps up on October 14th. October 14th is voting day. And she's been kind of pushed. There was a campaign to convince her to run, and she agreed to run. And she's been doing a really killer job of drawing attention to some of like the major issues affecting people in Vancouver, lower income people in general, but also specifically homeless people and people who live in the downtown east side. So, I mean, even from where I'm sitting in like my income level, which is upper lower class or very lower middle class, the rental market is fucking nuts right now in Vancouver. Like, have you tried to get a place recently? You've been here for a while.
Yeah, I've been wanting to move just because this place has mice and occasionally cockroaches, though the new manager's been very on top of having cockroach killers come in, and so that hasn't really been a problem. But yes, it's an old building, and I was like, maybe I'll find a basement suite that's cheaper. I just bought a really old car, so maybe I can afford to be a little bit further away from Central than I am right now. But like, I haven't found anything that's a better deal than this place because I've lived here 5 years and I'm still paying rent. That's like, I imagine if I was to move out, they would probably hike up the rent quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver right now is $2,000 and something.
Yeah, I'm paying $970 for this like old one, which is pretty good, but pretty shitty. Like, it's hard. It's
pretty expensive for like one person on a lower end wage to be paying.
It is. It sucks.
I had a great thing. Well, it's complicated, but I was couch surfing for 2 months recently.
Yeah.
So I was paying less than market rent, obviously, because I was sleeping on a couch and I didn't have my own door and I didn't have to get to really have my own things there. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty cool for only paying like $350 a month instead of paying $700 to $1,000. But there's some really negative effects to couch surfing as well. Not the least of which is just losing all your privacy.
Yeah.
But I found a new place. I've just moved in for October. I'm really excited because I managed to find a place for $600 a month for a room, which is like really, really good right now.
Yeah.
2 roommates for $600 in a basement suite that the ceilings are 5'9", and I'm 6'1".
5'9" ceilings, God.
I should be fair to this basement suite and say certain areas it's at least 6'2".
Don't want to hurt the basement suite ceiling.
Yeah, there's chunks of the house I can stand fully up in.
What about your bedroom?
Depending depending on what corner of the bedroom I'm in.
Okay, yeah.
But there's like a vent that goes through my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I can stand up on either side of it. But there's like a vent down the middle, which I have to fully duck underneath.
Oh, yeah, the middle. That sucks that it's not in the corner.
Yeah.
One of the corners.
Also, the shower in my new place, the bathroom is one of the shorter rooms of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bathtub is slightly raised off the ground of an already short room. I can't stand up fully in the shower. So if I want to wash under my arms, I have to do like a full squat in my shower. It's like living in a tiny man's house. It's like I'm visiting a gnome cousin, right. And like, here, use our little shower. And it's like you just have to squat over and it works just fine.
Yeah.
I think if I could stand fully up in my shower, the place where the shower head is pointing would point down like at my chest or my stomach. Like, it's a really small shower.
Yeah, I would hate that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. It's better than living on a couch.
Yeah, I would hate that even more.
Yeah, so it's a pretty dire like housing situation right now. And the homelessness count is the biggest it's ever been in Vancouver, which is why it's really cool that Jean's running for city council and talking about these issues in a really unflinching and kind of awesome way.
Yeah, she wants to do a rent freeze, and like that would just be great for me. Like 4-year rent freeze. I'll stay in this place for 4 more years.
Yeah, and the 4-year rent freeze proposal is based on another place. I think it was done in New York or something like that, where they had a rent freeze for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And that's where the campaign got that idea. Another one of the policy ideas out of Jean's camp that I really, really like, she's proposing a mansion tax. Any house in Vancouver that's worth over $5 million will be taxed extra, like an extra 1% or something.
And there's some fucking mansions in Vancouver. Like, I hadn't seen a lot of them until I started delivery driving, but I've driven to a lot of places in Vancouver that I wouldn't have had reason to go to otherwise. And yeah, just certain like giant fucking houses. Like sometimes interacting with leftists on the internet and stuff, I'll like think back to the house I grew up in, and it's pretty big, and be like, oh damn, I'm a terrible bougie person because my parents have a big house. But then I saw these houses and I was like, oh.
So, and you visited an area of Vancouver recently that has some interesting road rules. Or
yeah, I was driving around and I stumbled into this area that it was just like entering equestrian neighborhood, 30 kilometers per hour. And I was like, equestrian neighborhood? I feel like that has something to do with horses. And this is weird. So I'm just driving down the roads and they're like seeing horse poop. And I'm like, yeah, I guess people have horses. These are some really big houses with like large fenced off yards that like I can see that they might have horses and stables and these things. And then I saw at least 2 people actually driving their horses or riding their horses. But yeah, it was weird, like sharing the road in Vancouver in 2017 with horses, especially my 1995 Honda Civic. And I was like, I wonder if they're judging me for my old crappy car. They paid $1,000 for 1995 Honda Civic, where it's hooves. Where are the hooves? So yeah, that was weird. Like I honestly was just like, I've stumbled into an alternate dimension. Like Vancouver's not that big, and I just didn't know there was space for this. I didn't know that this existed here. I didn't know that there was horse neighborhoods like for rich people and their horses, but there is. So if you have a shit ton of money and you want to buy a mansion with horses, Vancouver's got a neighborhood for you.
Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by Lord for Lord Online Dating.
Trying to date as a landlord is hard because a lot of people don't understand your plight. They don't understand what it's like to have these tenants demanding things from you all the time. Like, come fix my place. I can't afford the rent.
You know, there's a lot of costs that come with being a landlord. First, you got to pay your property taxes. Then you got to get the tenants to pay the mortgage for you. It's just, it goes on and on. One of these days, it's just like, I'm going to sell, honestly. It's getting crazy. And then dating on top of that, people are saying like, well, at least you own extremely expensive property in this huge housing market where you've got $1 million property, at least you got $1 million of assets, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hello, do you have any idea how stressful it is collecting rent once a month? It's hard.
I used to be more open-minded. I'd go out on dates with people who rent, who are tenants, but all of a sudden they're talking about landlords like they're these terrible people. And I'm like, hello, boner killer.
We at Lord for Lord Dating have heard these stories countless times, and we knew it was time to launch a landlords only dating service to keep the riffraff out with all their ideas about economic justice, affordable housing, being able to continue living in the city that you grew up in because of an out of control rental market. Boring. Lord for Lord online dating, because tenants just don't get it. Okay, everyone, I'm here with Jean Swanson, who's a candidate for City Hall here in Vancouver and also a longtime anti-poverty activist, well known in Vancouver's downtown east side. Maybe first, Jean, if you want to introduce yourself and let us know how you got to be involved in politics.
Yeah, so I'm Jean Swanson, and I got involved in politics in 1974. I was slinging beer at the Patricia Hotel. I was a single parent, and I would see on the TV in the pub Bruce Erickson and Libby Davies, who worked for this organization called the Downtown Eastside Residents Association. And they were doing good things. At least it seemed to me they were good. I'd never done anything political before, but one of the things they were doing was trying to get the beer parlors so they wouldn't overserve. And my boss had showed me a picture of Bruce Erickson and told me, watch out for that guy. He'll turn you in. And I thought, well, he should turn me in if I overserve. So anyway, when they would come into the beer parlor and I would talk to them, and after a couple of months, I asked them for a job.
And back then, what were the priorities in the downtown east side? What type of work were you doing?
So it was 1974 when I started at DIRA, and we worked on closing down tax buyers. There were these guys that were ripping people off by buying their taxes and getting the money from the government and not paying the full amount back to the person. We worked on trying to get the Carnegie Center opened as a community center and trying to get liquor laws enforced in the pubs. And we worked on trying to get a new standards of maintenance bylaw passed, which we did, which is the one that isn't enforced now. And we didn't work on homelessness because there wasn't nearly as much as there is now. Just about anybody could get a home if they wanted, because governments were building thousands of units of social housing then. Welfare rates were high enough to pay the rent and eat, and you could always get a room in an SRO if worse came to worse.
So in this transition from that time to this time, what were the changes that created the homelessness problem? Like in 74, there wasn't the degree of homelessness, but now the newest homeless count in Vancouver is the highest it's ever been. Is this something that's just inevitable, or is this caused by decisions being made somewhere?
So about the time that my activist career began, the Business Council on National Issues, which is a very powerful corporate think tank, and the Fraser Institute, which was a BC-based powerful corporate think tank, started pushing out all kinds of policies that gave to the rich and took from the poor. They wanted privatization, they wanted free trade, they wanted cuts to taxes for the rich, they wanted cuts to programs for the poor. They talked about the deficit as though it was the arch foe of the entire planet. And they were extremely effective in pushing their message out and in getting politicians, right-wing politicians, to adopt those messages and implement their policies. And so for the last 40 years, we've had austerity policies, and they have really given to the rich, taken from the poor, and created the homeless situation that we have, the poverty situation that we have. It's been pretty bad, but I'm optimistic that things are beginning to turn around now.
There's this great video I saw online of, I guess it was a group of activists from the downtown east side who had taken over the city hall chamber, and then you were in the mayor's seat passing motions.
A crowd of demonstrators barged into Vancouver City Hall this morning, occupying the mayor's office, disrupting a city council meeting, as you saw, sitting in councillors' chairs, all to make their message inescapably clear. Homelessness is not an issue local politicians can afford to move slowly on. Our Tina Lovegreen was there.
24 protesters stormed council chambers today, demanding that the city act now on the issue of social housing and calling on officials to do more to end homelessness. The city responded by saying they will discuss the issue at a later time, but that didn't sit well with the protesters.
Tax the rich to house the poor! Tax the rich to house the poor! Tax
The chanting and disruption prompted councillors to leave, and the protesters took advantage of the empty chamber to run the meeting they were hoping to have. Jean Swanson of the Carnegie Community Action Project took the chair of Mayor Gregor Robertson. The protesters, quote unquote, passed several motions, the first being to fulfill the promise to build 100% social housing at welfare and pension rates at 58 West Hastings, and the same for 105 Kiefer Street in Chinatown. The second was to stop displacing tent cities. This comes in the wake of yesterday's news when a BC Supreme Court judge granted an injunction to evict homeless campers at 950 Main Street. And lastly, the protesters passed a motion to ensure owners of privately owned SROs meet maintenance bylaws. That's a reference to the recent eviction at the Balmoral Hotel.
People are dying of homelessness. It's urgent. We need immediate action. Winter is coming. We have over 2,000 homeless people on the street in Vancouver. There's even shelters are only enough shelters for less than half of them. The tent city is being evicted. We just lost 173 rooms at the Balmoral Hotel. People are going to die of homelessness. They are dying of homelessness. Somebody has to do something now, starting now.
The protesters say that they won't be backing down and they will continue the fight for social housing. Meanwhile, I spoke to City Councillor Kerry Jang, who says he understands their frustration and shares their frustration, but there is a process that needs to take place when it comes to these motions, and that is what needs to be followed here. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
How did you take over City Hall? Who was involved with that? What was the thrust of that activist effort to commandeer the mayor's seat?
Right now, before I started running for this by-election, I was working at the Carnegie Community Action Project, and they're part of a coalition called Our Homes Can't Wait, which is made up of most of the resident-based groups in the downtown east side and has 4 demands for housing on 10 lots in the downtown east side, 100% welfare pension rate housing on 4 lots in the downtown east side, a rent freeze, and to buy 58 West Hastings, which is a big site in the downtown east side. There's currently a garden on it, and use that for 100% welfare pension rate housing. So last August of 2016, we got the mayor down in the downtown east side, and we asked him to come to a meeting, and we basically got him to sign a statement saying that we could have the 100% welfare pension rate housing at 58 West Hastings, or at least that he would bring it to rezoning by June 2017. So that had passed, and we were trying to think of some sort of action to show the council that housing and homelessness are an extreme priority in the downtown east side, since they weren't taking it as a priority. So we just basically decided to go up there and interrupt the council meeting and make some motions of our own. There was about 25 of us, and we kind of went in small groups, with the most recognizable of us going last. And when we all got in there, we just started shouting, "Our homes can't wait. Our homes can't wait." And they shut down a council meeting, and then we had designated speakers on a number of topics. One was the tent city. We wanted the city to stop harassing it and to provide the facilities it needs. One was on 58 West Hastings, and there was a couple of other ones. And so our spokespeople got up and made motions, and the council members listened. And then they said, when we asked for action on those motions, they said, well, they'd consider it in due course, or something to that effect. So we just started chanting, "Our homes can't wait" again, and they all left. After a while, somebody said that I should get in the mayor's chair, so I did. And I sat up there and we passed all of our motions, passed them all unanimously, with all of us sitting in the council chairs and in the mayor's chair. Yeah, it was fun. And now they have all kinds of security up there, so whenever they see us coming, they try and make it hard to come in.
The current municipal government here, Vision Vancouver, the current mayor, he was elected in, was it 2008, on the promise of ending homelessness in Vancouver. They later kind of changed it to ending street homelessness, and it's kind of ambiguous whether they've even done that. Are they taking the issue of homelessness seriously enough?
Well, no, they aren't, or I wouldn't be running against them. I've been fighting them ever since they were in, trying to get them to stop gentrification, because they have policies in the downtown east side that are bringing in all kinds of condos, which are pushing up property values, which are pushing up taxes and rents, and hundreds of low-income SRO rooms have been lost to gentrification. They're, instead of renting at the welfare rate, they're now renting some of them at $1,400 a month for a single room with a bathroom down the hall. And they have done nothing to stop that from happening. As well, when you talk about trying to get federal or provincial money for social housing, they just don't talk about the actual amount that's needed. They don't push for what's actually needed, and they don't put enough of the city's own money into social housing. So yeah, it's a real huge problem, and they try to manipulate it by, people say we need new social housing, and they want to look like they're providing social housing, so they changed the definition of social housing. People used to think that social housing meant housing for low-income people, but then they changed the definition so that no low-income people are guaranteed spaces in social housing, except in the downtown east side. So, they've been really sneaky about it, and they haven't really gone after what's needed. They haven't treated it as a crisis. They basically have the attitude of, well, my hands are tied. It's a federal provincial responsibility. We can't do anything. And then they don't really push for it or engage citizens in pushing the other levels of government, which is what I'd hope to do if I get elected.
One of the things that you had mentioned is social housing that's 100% welfare rate housing. Something that comes to mind, I hear that idea criticized, that there needs to be mixed development where some of the building is welfare rate housing and some of it is not. People will frame it in terms of put all the welfare rate housing together. You're going to create like a ghetto or a negative situation.
Ghetto is a place where people who have been excluded by others from other places try and build a community. So, for example, some people might say that Chinatown was a ghetto, but it was populated by people who were excluded from all other parts of Vancouver, and they were trying to build a community in Chinatown. Same with the Powell Street area for people of Japanese descent. So the same thing happens with low-income people in low-income areas as they try to create a community. I think that mostly when the term social mix is used, it's a social cleansing term, and the whole theory of it has been designed to justify allowing developers to take over low-income areas, claiming that poor people hang out with richer people, that they will somehow be uplifted or become rich themselves, which when you think of it is ridiculous, especially if a lot of the poor people are dealing with issues like physical disability or mental disability or drug use or something like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then the social mix, quote, social mix housing that does get built, like Woodward's, you have 536 condos and 125 supportive housing units. There's no mix. There's a rich door and a poor door, a rich amenity room and a poor amenity room. And because all the businesses that come in on the ground floor cater to the rich people because they make more money, the whole street level becomes a zone of exclusion for the low-income people. When we call for 100%, we always say 100% welfare pension rate, so we can get people with pensions in there too, like Chinese seniors or other seniors. And 1/3 of the pension income isn't much higher than the welfare income. It's 400 and some. So yeah, that's what we call for, is 100% welfare pension rate. And we think that those buildings can be run well too, especially if you give the tenants some say over how it's run. I mean, social mix housing is okay. I think it's actually a good idea if you had an area that had no housing in it and you were putting new housing in it. Yes, of course, it should be socially mixed. But to say you have to have more richer people in a poor neighborhood, that's just going to push out the poor people.
Seriously wrong.
Yeah, so I don't know, hearing the word landlord over and over again, landlord, it's not something that I'd really thought about before, but it is strange that we call the people who own buildings that we rent from lords, like the lords of the land.
It's the only place where we use the word lord, really.
Yeah, I mean, like in royalty in England, I think they're still lords, but their titles are mostly ceremonial. But it's like, yeah, no, just anyone who...
It's like if we called our bosses like wage lords.
Oh, my wage lord said that I got to work late today. But
city councilors were called city lords.
Yeah, it kind of encoded in that is this reverence maybe for these lords. You know, it's also a religious word called Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. I got two lords. Jesus and my landlord. Those are the lords in my life.
Yeah, there's different spheres of landlords. Like if you're renting out your house that you own, and like that's kind of like the low level landlord if you're renting out like a single property or something. But then there's like the high level landlords of people who just own tons of land and have tons and tons of tenants. That's a true capital L
Lord
of the land.
Yeah, if you own a business who happens to own like 15 apartment buildings in Vancouver, each worth millions and millions of dollars, I don't know. Yeah, you're a high roller. Maybe we should be calling you a lord. Maybe we should bow down. Kiss those feet, those lord feet.
I think a lot of people would be willing to kiss feet for affordable rent in this market right now. Like, if your landlord came, it's like, I'll knock $100 off your rent every month, but you have to kiss my feet on the first of the month.
Be so bad. Maybe like Jesus, like in the Bible, I could wash their feet with my hair and tears, or is that tears? I forget the Bible, but definitely like the hair thing is in there. Washing the Lord's feet with your hair.
That's in the Bible?
Yeah, someone does it to Jesus. I couldn't do it because my hair's not long enough, but I'd grow my hair long and wash my Lord's feet with my hair. If I could get like this place for like $600 instead of $900, that'd be dope. Today's episode of the Seriously Wrong podcast is brought to you by Tenant Lips, special lipstick for tenants to smooch the soft, smooth, supple feet of their lords, of their landlords. Now, you probably only have one landlord, but your landlord has a lot of tenants, a lot of people smooching their feet, and you want your lipstick to stand out. So we offer a glittery lipstick, bright pink, bold colors, red, green, blue, colors you've never even heard of, colors your landlord will be grateful to have imprinted on their rich, holy feet. Tenant Lips, special lipstick for kissing the landlord's feet. Proud sponsor of today's episode of Seriously Wrong.
Yeah, and on the subject of social exclusion of poor people, you wrote a book called Poor Bashing, The Politics of Exclusion, that's about this topic, which I had the pleasure of reading, well, the first half of, but I will finish it. I thought it was a really interesting book about anti-poor sentiment in society. And we've got these deep-held kind of social biases against low-income people. And even some of the most reprehensible things that anyone says about anyone is being said about poor people. My question would be, in your terms, what is poor bashing and why is it important that we're able to name it and talk about it?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I ended up choosing that title for the book, Poor Bashing, because I was hoping it would creep into people's vocabulary. So poor bashing is discrimination and stereotyping against people because they have low incomes. And it involves excluding them, calling them names. It involves hate. It involves beating them up. It involves throwing beer cans at them when you get out of the pub at night. It involves thinking of poor people as being less than other people, thinking of them as being less intelligent than other people, thinking of them as being less deserving than other people. And it happens every day in every way against people who are poor. One woman I interviewed for my book, she said, it happens whenever I go outside. It's really harsh. And it's so harsh that a lot of people blame themselves for the discrimination and the hatred that they feel. I was hoping that one of the things the book would do would be to try and take some of that blame off and show how it was created by society and that it wasn't deserved and that poor people are just as great as everybody else.
Something that you had talked about in the book along that subject is that the people who perpetuate and believe most strongly in poor bashing are often those who are most vulnerable to become poorer themselves, like people who are on the margin. They're not receiving social assistance or welfare or anything, but if something happened to them suddenly and they lost their job, then it would be very likely that they would. Do you have any theory on why anti-poor hatred is so prevalent among the upper poor, the nearly poor?
Actually, I was talking to a guy today who basically said that he hated homeless people, and then after a while revealed that he was sleeping on a friend's couch. So close to it. So what you say is definitely true. I don't know what that is. I do know that hatred of the poor is fostered by people who aren't poor. Like in my book, I have all kinds of examples of the corporate think tanks and how they perpetuate stereotypes and demeaning attitudes about people who are poor. I have a little dictionary that I kind of go through about back in the 90s when I wrote the book. They were saying poor people are dependent. They can't delay gratification. There's a whole bunch of phrases that were used. They perpetuate these in the think tanks, and then they go into the papers, and then they kind of go into everybody's consciousness. So they're not blameless, right? It's not just the people that are on the edge of poverty that feel that way. It's that type of feeling is consciously created by people in the upper echelons.
It seems that often there's a political advantage to taking the position.
The political reason for demeaning people who are poor, or the political reason for racism, for example, is so low wages seem justified, or so it seems justified to occupy North America if you're Columbus, or it seems justified to occupy the downtown east side with condos if you're a developer. If you demean somebody, then it seems okay to take what they have. So there's a lot of political reasons, economic reasons for demeaning people. And if we could stop doing that, I think we could have a way better society.
Recently, you were awarded the highest civilian honor in Canada, the Order of Canada by the federal government for your anti-poverty work. How do you feel about that great honor?
Well, I felt very conflicted at first. I consulted with a few people about whether I should accept it or not. My first feeling was, I'd much rather have the government end poverty and homelessness than give me an award. And why would the government give me an award for doing things that they have the power to do but haven't? It's not really the government that gives it, but that's the feeling about it. But I ended up accepting it because it does come in handy sometimes. Like where it's come in especially handy for me is friends who have been racially profiled and arrested, and I've been able to write character references for them to try and keep them out of jail. And I can sign it, Jean Swanson, CM, which means Order of Canada. And one time there was a horrible article in the Maple Ridge News about the tent city there, and it was trashing the tent city. It was trashing me and some friends of mine who'd had a demonstration in Victoria for housing, and it said that we were thugs. So I wrote a letter basically sticking up for the tent city residents, and I got to sign it. Thug and Order of Canada recipient. I had fun doing that.
So when you look back over the decades of work advocating for people, is there anything that sticks out as proud achievements along the way, or fun that you had?
Well, there haven't been very many achievements, let me tell you. Sometimes I say I have a callus on my forehead from bonging it against a brick wall. We got a few little things like the Carnegie Center opened after 7 years of work. We got a no condo zone in the downtown east side after 3 years of work, but it's still not good enough to save the community. We got a welfare cut rolled back once. Little thing. Oh, we got a food program, a provincially funded food program in low-income schools after 5 years of work. Nothing is fast. The fun times have been I always call them capers. When we went into City Hall, that was fun. We had a demonstration one time called Free the Fish. The city was going to spend a whole bunch of money on the aquarium, but what we really needed the money spent on was housing. So we said free the fish and build housing for humans. Oh, and there was another time when it was so funny. The city was considering a law that would allow chickens to be raised in the city. And there was a whole huge council report that had a whole thing about, it was basically about human rights for chickens. And one of our volunteers, Robert Bonner, showed up in our office in a chicken suit because I showed him the report, and we were like, our minds were blown because we were totally freaked out by homelessness for humans. And they were talking about how chickens needed X number of square feet per each one, and they needed a proper home and all this, which is fine. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. But anyway, Robert decided that he would go up dressed as a chicken and represent I forget the name of the group, that it was like Chickens in Solidarity with Homeless Humans, and speak about the need for housing humans as well as chickens. There's been lots of fun things that we did. The paint-ins have been really fun, where we get a whole bunch of paint and pick a wall and open it up to the community, really community building, open it up to the community to paint whatever they want. And usually it ends up housing for all. And the Poverty Olympics were really fun. We had 3 Poverty Olympics, one each year before the Olympics, 2008, 2009, and 2010. And we had media coverage from all over the world. And we had our own mascots, Creepy the cockroach, Itchy the bedbug, and Chewy the rat. And we had our own games, the poverty line high jump. Oh, my favorite game was the AIDS Vancouver did this one. We had different groups sponsoring different games. There was a housing hurdle, but my favorite game was the broad jump over the bed bug infested mattress. It was hilarious. And we had our own anthem. And the best thing about it was the whole community was involved. We had our own torch, which in the last year we had a torch relay that went across the province. And the best thing about it was that the whole community was involved. And if anyone went up to anybody who was involved and said, well, why are you doing this? Everybody always said was, if the money that had been spent on the Olympics were spent on ending poverty, it could be ended. And the message was so clear.
This is a very special confirmation bias news report. We now go live to the Vancouver General Hospital, where a pandemic has been sweeping the city's landlords. We have our on-the-ground reporter, Rick Giovanni. Can you tell us what's going on here? What's the deal? Who's filling up the emergency rooms?
Thank you very much, Tom Giovanni, my twin brother. I'm here at Vancouver General Hospital today because it is reaching crisis proportions. Landlords are being wheeled in one after another with strained or broken thumbs. They've been twiddling their thumbs so feverishly as they watch the property values go through the roof that they're actually causing some permanent damage in some cases. It's not pretty, I'll tell you that. The people in stretchers, wrapping up their thumbs, all that twiddling really does hurt landlords, and it's something that a lot of so-called social justice types don't notice. I've got a landlord right here. How are your thumbs doing, sir?
Terrible. They're swollen. They're in so much pain.
And how did this happen? Who did this to you?
Well, it's like I'm waiting around for all those rent checks to roll in. I'm waiting for my property values to skyrocket disproportionately to the cost of living and wages of normal people. But it's like, what else do you do but twiddle your thumbs? And then, they just can't take it.
Don't twiddle them, sir. Don't.
No, but my property values are going up. The rent checks are coming in.
This is horrible. This is horrible, Tom. No Lord deserves this. No Lord deserves this. Back to you, Tom.
Terrible, just terrible. I was personally affected by this because my grandmother is a landlord, and she developed arthritis at the age of 40 from twiddling her thumbs. Just last year, they had to amputate. It's not good. It's not pretty. We'll have more on this as the story develops. And coming up next on Confirmation Bias News, homeless people. Why does everyone make such a big deal out of it? We investigate.
Another thing that Jean and I didn't really get to in this interview that I think is really cool and interesting is some of the endorsements that she's got running for city council. She's been endorsed by Ann Roberts.
Who's Ann Roberts?
She's a former city councillor here in Vancouver. Also Ellen Woodsworth, former city councillor, and Tim Lewis, former city councillor as well, I believe. She was also endorsed by Libby Davies, who is the former deputy leader of the federal NDP. And actually, when Jagmeet Singh was in town, who's now the leader of the federal NDP, he stopped by the rent freeze booth and seemed really into it and got a selfie with them and stuff and thought it was cool.
Oh, neat.
Although he didn't
endorse her.
He didn't endorse her, no. Also, the Vancouver Tenants Union has endorsed her unanimously based on her strong policies around protecting renters. Naomi Klein, the author, tweeted about Jean Swanson, saying that she was an inspiring glimpse into what electoral politics could be. And my favorite endorsement is Gabor Mate, the addictions advocate. We've talked about him on the show before. He was in one of the Zeitgeist movies talking about the roots of addiction. He said that Jean Swanson is an admirable, tireless advocate and organizer for a fair and just society, and that her candidacy has his enthusiastic support.
Yeah, I love Gabor Mate. I have read, I think, 4 of his books. And we did an event with him with Zeitgeist Vancouver when I was involved with them. He has great stuff, great work. And I mentioned this to you before, but I think it's funny that he said enthusiastic endorsement because he's just not an enthusiastic person. Dealing with addictions and dealing with like really heavy topics, childhood abuse, and how those things carry on and have effects later in life. He's an inspiring person, but just not a very enthusiastic person. But
but Jean has made him enthusiastic.
Jean did it. Jean turned him into an enthusiastic supporter. But yeah, no, he's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, and all of these endorsers and pseudo endorsers are kind of brilliant in their own right. It's a pretty great crew, great posse behind her.
Yeah. Jean's posse.
Jean's got a posse. There's a housing crisis right now in BC, in Vancouver. And like we said before, the highest homelessness count on record. And now you're running for city council in a by-election. What's your plan? What are you going to do once you're in there?
So we have 3 neat things related to housing. The first, of course, is to end homelessness by building modular housing for every homeless person. The city is now going to build 600, but we probably need 2,500. If I were in there, I would push to get those happening immediately. I wouldn't stop at 600 per year. The second thing is a rent freeze. We want to just stop rent increases for at least 4 years, at least in Vancouver. It's provincial, but we would like to open up City Hall to social movements and to people that are working for social and environmental justice and tenants, and work with people who are getting basically screwed by the rental situation to put pressure on the city and then the province. And there are things the city could do, like the city could change its permitting process to prevent rent increases after renovations, and we could implement that immediately. The third thing, which is getting a lot of really good press, is the mansion tax. We're saying that if you have a house that's worth $5 million or less, don't worry, we're not going to raise your taxes. But if your house is worth over $5 million, we'd tax the amount that's over $5 million by an extra 1% of the assessed value, up to $10 million. And then we'd tax the amount over $10 million by an extra 2%. So this would mean that, for example, that a guy like Chip Wilson, who is from Lululemon, who has the most expensive house in Vancouver that's worth $75 million, he'd have to pay about $1.5 million a year in taxes. And we think we could get about $175 million a year. It would house all the homeless people in the first year. In the second year, we could start building social and co-op housing, and we could start giving land back to the 3 host nations that was stolen from them, that they could build housing on or whatever. It's an amazing source of revenue. You know, the feds and the province have access to income tax. The city only has property tax. But income tax is graduated or progressive, so it's a lower rate for poorer people, middle rate for middle, higher rate for rich. And there's no reason why property tax shouldn't be like that too. And we've had good response from a couple of academics, one who said that richer people won't like it, but there's no reason not to do it. So I'm kind of hopeful that if we keep pushing this, especially if the province does get money out of politics so that the mansion owners won't have so much influence, that we might be able to get it.
So one of the signature kind of proposals from your campaign is the rent freeze. It's really awesome. You got the 15-foot tall rent freeze sign where the words rent freeze are made out of filled out petitions of people asking for the rent freeze. But you mentioned that that's potentially within the provincial jurisdiction. And this is one of the probably most common criticisms of the campaign from other campaigns and also from supporters of those other campaigns. For example, I noticed that Pete Fry, the Green Party candidate, mentions on his website, on his pitch to the voters, he mentions your rent freeze in the negative before he talks about any of his ideas. It's like the first paragraph of his, nice to meet you. I'm Pete Fry. You should vote for me. Rent freeze is impossible. Here's my ideas. How do you respond to the criticism that a single city councillor, it doesn't have the jurisdiction to bring in a policy like that?
Well, that's the difference between Pete and me. And that's the difference between Vision and me. That Vision and Pete will say, oh, my hands are tied. I can't do what's necessary. And me, I'm going to open up city council to people who are working for justice. And if people say we need a rent freeze, I'll make a motion. We'll get lots of delegations up there. We could get hundreds of delegations up like we had for 105 Kiefer. Maybe we can sway the council members like they did at 105 Kiefer. And maybe things will keep rolling. We'll get some media, get some academics on side, get some pressure on the province, and we'll actually be able to do what's necessary. I'm not going to be the kind of person that says, oh, I can't do that. It's not my jurisdiction, when it's necessary. That keeps people from doing what's necessary. We need to open up our democracy so that we can use it for what we need. And that's the kind of counselor I want to be.
I want a counselor like that. Is there anything in your platform, is there anything that you're fighting for that is strictly and unambiguously in the city's jurisdiction that you're advocating for?
Sure. So one thing is renovictions. So the city has this policy, tenant relocation and protection policy, where they can, if a developer comes and wants a renovation permit, then the city can require him to do certain things. And right now they require him to give the tenant so many months' notice, pay for moving expenses, and they can even require them to provide new accommodation at 20% less than the market rent. So what we would do if we got in is try and change that, which is in the city's jurisdiction, so that a developer could not get a building permit or a development permit unless they had a signed contract with all of the tenants saying that they could come back at the old rent. There's another thing we could do that would be really good. The city has a good standards of maintenance bylaw, which we helped write back in the 70s. And it says in section 23.8 that the city can go in and do the work in buildings where repairs are necessary if the landlord won't, and bill the landlord. And if the landlord doesn't pay, they can put it on his taxes. And if he doesn't pay his taxes, they can take the building. But the city won't enforce that. It won't use that section. There's no reason that these slum buildings like the Balmoral Hotel should be closed, pushing out 173 people and closing off 173 spots in a city where we have over 2,000 homeless people. It's disgusting. And we should use the laws that we have to their fullest extent, and that's what I do.
And one of the questions I feel that's at play here in Vancouver is kind of what type of city do we want to be? What type of society do we want to be? What world do we want to live in? What world do we want to make together? So I guess my question for you is, what type of society do you want to live in? What type of society do you want to co-create with us? And what do you want to build here?
So I've been working against poverty all my life. So of course it'd be nice to have a society that didn't have poverty in it. What's happening in the city now is everybody that isn't rich is being pushed out. So we need policies that bring people back. I had a great meeting with hotel workers, and the bus fare is killing them coming to work, and they can't afford parking if they drive. And they're beautiful, wonderful people. It's ridiculous from a humane point of view and from an environmental point of view to have a city where the people that do the hard work can't even live in it, and where people are homeless when other people live in $75 million mansions. Good social housing and co-op housing like they have in Vienna, and free transit and free internet, and just have a society where people are all included regardless of their gender or race or income. And the thing is, there's been all kinds of research that shows that that's better for everybody, even the rich. If you Google equality trust, there's all kinds of epidemiological evidence that if you have a more equal society, it's better it reduces racism, it reduces sexism, it creates a higher life expectancy, there's less teenage pregnancies, there's higher voter turnout. Chip Wilson, we want this equality for you too, so you can have a longer life expectancy. The inequality is really harsh on people, like homeless people having half the life expectancy as other people, and poor people have 10 or 12 fewer years of life than other people, richer people. There's no reason why we can't have policies that end that. No reason whatsoever. And we need them, and let's go for them. That's what I'm saying. Let's go for them. Let's open up our democracy, get a little bit militant, and go for those policies that we need. The slogan is bringing a revolution to City Hall, but it'd be nice to have some more equality, that's for sure, and that's what I'm going to fight for.
Welcome to Keyboard Warrior Radio Theater.
I don't usually weigh in on politics, but I've been looking at this local by-election, and I can't believe that this Gene Swanson wants to institute a mansion tax, a so-called mansion tax. Just because someone owns a property that costs a little bit more money doesn't mean that they need to be bled dry paying tons of extra money. Who do you think are the people creating jobs? Who do you think are the people paying the wages of the tenants? It's people who own quote-unquote mansions. I'm grateful to my wage lord who owns a mansion and pays my wages, and I don't think he should have to pay a penny more.
Hey, Chris, I know you from like a non-political thing, and I've never really had a political conversation with you or whatever, so this is kind of not sure about making this post, but I really care about this, so I wanted to make some points clear to you that maybe you didn't understand. Well, first, Jean's mansion tax is specifically to target the out-of-control problem of street homelessness. This is a fully costed plan to end street homelessness in Vancouver in 1 year. It's also a tax that is 1% of value assessed over $5 million. So if your mansion is worth $4,999,000, this tax won't affect you at all. And if your house is worth $5,001, it's only going to be a raise of your taxes by 1 penny. This tax only applies to value beyond 5 million. And if it's beyond 10 million, it's a tax of 2%. This is a small price to pay for some of the richest people, not only in the country, but sometimes some of the richest people on earth, to end homelessness once and for all here in Vancouver. I think it's a price that I'm willing to pay.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that it was a fully developed plan that would actually end homelessness, that would take all of the homeless people in the downtown east side and all over Vancouver, one of the largest homeless populations on the planet. It's a big problem. I see it every day, and actually end that within 1 year. That's crazy. And only 1 or 2% for people over $5 million. I'm sure they can afford that. That seems completely reasonable. And ending homelessness. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to vote for Jean Swanson. Thanks for letting me know. I wasn't aware of all the details.
Hey, no problem. I know a lot of the times here on Facebook, when you get in a conflict like this, it ends really well and everyone has the best possible position at the end. I'm glad that this could be one of those times. Thanks a lot, Chris. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for making great arguments, and thanks to me for not taking any of it personally or digging in my feet when I'm wrong about something.
This is one of the great things about Facebook conversations is that I see this type of thing all the time, and this is just one of those times. So, see you later.
See you later. Facebook is great. Political discussions on Facebook turn out well. It's great. Thanks.
And we'll see you next time for another episode of Keyboard Warrior Radio Theater.
So one of the cool things from Jean's platform that we didn't touch on in the interview is, well, first of all, in BC, if you're a landlord and you own multiple properties in different municipalities, you can vote in each municipality that you own property. So you can vote more than once.
So if you own a large company like Boardwalk or something, and you own apartment buildings in like 10 cities across BC, you can vote in all of them?
It might just apply if you're like a personal owner. I'm not sure if it applies to like corporations.
Right. Oh, okay.
But so early leading up to the election, the city invites landlords to register to vote, like property owners to register to vote early, but they don't have that opportunity for renters. And actually back in the 70s and 80s in Vancouver, it used to be that they would send people door to door doing voter enumeration. So visiting each door, seeing if there's any eligible renters there, and then giving them the capacity to register at that time and be ready for the election, which they no longer do. That was cut by like a right-wing municipal government because tenants tend to vote more left-wing.
Right. Yeah. So it's not in the interests of the ruling powers of the city to encourage more renters, i.e. more poor, lower income people to vote. It's in their interest to encourage more property owners to vote because they will probably vote for them.
Yeah, and so Jean has made it explicitly clear on her platform that she's going to fight to restore that voter enumeration to make sure that everyone who's eligible to vote in Vancouver is given the opportunity to do so. And it's actually something that while some things in Jean's platform, it's ambiguous whether or not the city can do it alone. This is something that very clearly the city can do alone and would make a really big impact. So it's something that I'm a big fan of. And if she was elected, I think it would be a high priority to push that through in the first term because it would pay dividends down the road to have a more engaged and active voting base.
I'm just blown away by the awesomeness of the people that are working on my campaign. I went out and had sushi with 5 of them the other night, and they were just such amazing, amazing people. Jack Gates, who is the hero of the downtown east side because he's taken on the slumlords at considerable risk to his own personal self when the city wouldn't take them on. And his friend Mohammed, who got donated heaters for the Lion Hotel folks when they had no heat. And Beverly Ho, who's been organizing fiercely for 105 Kiefer with the Chinese elders. And Sam and his little son, talon. Sam does everything. He does absolutely everything. He, picking up flyers to organizing a fundraiser at the Dosa House to driving me around. And that's just, a little small sampling. The art in this campaign is amazing. Maddie, well, the banner that you talked about, the rent freeze banner, the 15-foot rent freeze banner, that was a really touching scene where an elderly friend of my late partner came to our fundraiser, and we were trying to figure out how do we have something that makes a hook that brings people out to this rent freeze news conference we're having. And this friend, who is from a city councillor in Smithers, had this idea of making a banner with the petitions. And he was talking to Maddie, our young artist in our campaign. And the next thing you know, Maddie and the others in the campaign have produced this 15-foot banner using his ideas. And he was thrilled. He took a picture of it to take back to Smithers. And then Maddie made the notice of assessment that we gave to the fake Chip Wilson, who was wearing a Chip Wilson Max. And there's another woman who's making tax the rich wallets out of recycled file folders. So there's an amazing amount of art and banners and stuff that is happening in this campaign. And the people who are just working their hearts out, and most of them are doing it for free. And, they're the wave of the future. I guess that sounds trite, but I have all kinds of confidence that with them around, we're going to get a better society by hook or crook.
I can absolutely understand that renters who are listening are going, yes, this is a fabulous idea. But what do you say to landlords about the fairness of, freezing them for 4 years when they're also facing increasing costs?
So first of all, it's not right for people to always take the landlord side, the richest person's side. Why doesn't somebody say, what about the poor tenants? What about the tenants that are having to pay these extra costs? Second thing is, rents are generally not based on costs. They're based on what the market will bear. I was looking at some real estate listings for apartment buildings for sale, and they actually have the amount of expenses that are paid. And I looked at about 5 of them, and in all of them, the amount of expenses that the landlord had to run the apartment, including everything, taxes and everything, was about 1/3 of their revenue. The landlords are making a profit, and the tenants are suffering. And it's not just tenants, because tenants have to pay so much of such a high percentage of their income for rent. They have less left to spend, like in restaurants or in stores. So it's bad for other businesses besides the landlord business.
So, Jean, there's a couple of different things going on here. And look, let's use me as the example. I rent in Coquitlam. I know that my landlord is allowed to legally put up my rent. I think the rate of inflation plus whatever percent is allowable legally.
It's 4% this year.
Exactly. So you're saying a rent freeze. So is it freezing it at those rates?
We want the legal rent increase to be 0 for the next 4 years until there's a new provincial government, and then reassess it and see if the freeze needs to stay in place.
Okay.
Are you concerned at all, Jean, about unintended consequences? So I'm going to go back to landlords. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Sure, there are some landlords who probably gouging and figure if I can get it, I'm going to do it. But I think there's a lot of good landlords out there too. And do you think, what if some of them say, you know what, it's not worth the hassle. I'm just going to sell the place and take it right out of the rental pool?
Well, if they could sell the place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the buyer would take it out of the rental pool.
It doesn't necessarily, but if it's starting, if you are thinking, well, I'm going to buy an investment property and I'm going to put it out there for rent, and now you're going to freeze my ability to increase rent for 4 years. Well, maybe I'm not. I'm just going to sell it. Like, what is the advantage to a landlord to even rent to someone if they can't keep up with the cost of living?
Well, one of the great advantages that landlords have is the advantage of property appreciation. Property has been appreciating a lot in Vancouver lately. There was a study that said that people who own property make more money twiddling their thumbs and waiting for their property to appreciate than they do by working. So landlords have that advantage. They're getting increased value from property appreciation. They don't have to get all of their revenue from the tenants. So I think it would be a sob story if they thought they couldn't exist with a rent freeze for 4 years.
Robot father.
Yes,
I have
robot son, robot adult son.
I have a question for you, Robot Father. Why do the humans let other humans live out on the streets when they already have so many empty houses?
I agree, Robot Son. That is highly illogical. They should end homelessness. It only takes political will.
Humans already initiate, follow through, and complete massive infrastructure plans, building entire cities, museums, amusement parks. It seems like housing a few thousand homeless people would be easy. Does not compute. Father, help. Help compute.
Son, robots like us with our waterproof resin outer layer can survive indefinitely on the streets, but to humans it is often fatal. It makes no sense that in a society as rich as this, there is even a single homeless person. There is a great imaginative and moral failing of the elected leaders of humans. Adult Robot Son.
Adult Son, are you down in the basement listening to those damn supercomputers again? They don't understand anything.
Yeah, Dad, I needed a place to twiddle my thumbs and wait for you to die to inherit the properties, so it's just, I don't know, they don't make a lot of sense, but they're fun to listen to sometimes, even though they're stupid.
Yeah, we thought inventing supercomputers would be a great idea, but they just don't get it. That's why they're down in the basement of our mansion. Anyway, get out of there. It's time to get up. Stop twiddling your thumbs. Your mother wants to go for a horse ride to the lake. We're going to take the gold-plated boat out for a spin.
Oh boy, the gold-plated boat? Okay, I'll be right there. I love you, rich dad.
And I love you, rich adult son.
So I want to thank Jean for inviting me into her home to do this interview and sharing some really interesting stories about the stuff she's done in activism and the stuff that she'd hoped to do in City Hall.
Hearing her stories of being involved in this since the 1970s, it makes me feel like a baby, first of all, and also a fake activist because I don't do any of these things. I talk on Facebook and sometimes into microphones. But yeah, no, she's real shit. She's following through on her principles and the things she believes in, really trying to make those changes happen despite setbacks. And as she said, not necessarily achieving all the things that they've wanted to achieve or many of the things that they wanted to achieve at all.
Yeah, the things that they got, it took 5 years of hard work. And then I'd say that Jean is one of the first people that I've been able to speak to who I could really look up to as an activist, over a long period of time and not have any reservations about being yeah, this is amazing work. She's really putting her money where her mouth is consistently. Homeless people and drug addicted people are human beings. They deserve dignity and we can do more to help them. We can do more to help each other in society. And I'm going to wake up every day and try to lend a hand. Yeah. And that's fucking crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of dedication to do that for 40 years or more.
Even in Vancouver media, when she's being criticized by either other parties or pundits or whatever, because she's seen as too radical or whatever, almost always they'll say Jean Swanson's a great person. She's got great values, but her policies are bad. It's never she's a horrible person. These are horrible policies, which you typically see in a partisan race. But because Jean's been around so long, she was awarded the Order of Canada and all this other stuff. Her opponents, they don't have the tool to personally slander her. So it allows her message to go a little further. And also just as an anecdote about how she's a really cool person is when I was over at her house doing this interview, she really wanted to feed me some scrambled eggs. She didn't have any scrambled eggs already made or anything.
Yeah, it wasn't leftovers from her, she made too many for herself.
No, it was we were wrapping up and I was okay, this was a great interview. I'll let you know when it's up and thanks. And she's oh, are you hungry? I could make you some scrambled eggs. I'm no, it's okay. And she's well, yeah, we could. And I was oh, that's so sweet. That's really nice. And actually another time Jean Swanson gave me cookies. No part of it was artifice. It was completely organically Jean Swanson just giving me cookies because she made some cookies and she wanted to share. That's a real experience for my life. How can you not love that? How can you not love Jean Swanson?
Well, I mean, everyone likes cookies.
It's really cool. We've got this opportunity now here in Vancouver to elect an activist city councillor who's going to push the boundaries of what's possible in their office. They've got a really good record. They're someone that is eminently trustworthy, positive reputation. And in this by-election, we got a chance to elect Jean. And I'd be really excited if that happened.
Well, this was brought up in the interview that a rent freeze is actually technically, it would have to be instituted at a provincial level. So it's not something that she could do. And also she's just one city councillor. Like, how does that happen? How do I get my goodies, my rent freeze goodies that I want?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, part of it is ambiguous because it's very, very unambiguously this could happen at the provincial level. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility that something could be done at the municipal level. It's just, it would require some work, and it would require like looking over a bunch of old bylaws and stuff. You could find a place to make it work. And I'm not an expert on this, but I am skeptical of the idea that municipalities can't fight for the right to do things and implement them, or like have city council pass a motion to have a rent freeze and then either be able to find a way to do it themselves or work together with the senior government to make it happen. But as being the position of one person on a city council, I think you're not in charge if you're just one person of 10 on a city council.
Right.
But I think having the voice of an activist there, having the voice of someone who is listening to the grassroots and is trying to open up City Hall to activists, I think it could really change the overall tone of the discussion. And I think a lot of city councilors and stuff, there's kind of like this professional type of myopia that comes with that. What is possible, what is not possible gets kind of distorted. And there isn't really room for dreaming or for like trying to push for things. And to put someone in there who is pushing for things, who is dreaming, who's working together with the grassroots, I think a lot more can be achieved. Even like in this election so far, everyone else's campaigns is being completely framed by Jean. All the other people who are running for city council, they're all kind of in the shadow of Jean's rhetoric and Jean's hopes and Jean's what Jean is striving to fight for. Everyone else is being framed by her. So even from the bully pulpit of just being a city council candidate, she's already shifting the Overton window. Like, for example, the ruling party, Vision Vancouver, announced that their candidate is supporting giving the municipal vote to permanent residents who aren't Canadian citizens who live in Vancouver, which is something that's in Jean's platform. And there's other examples of that. Of like Jean put out this radical agenda, and then all the other parties are kind of picking and choosing from it what they think they can bear to put into their platform and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I think putting her onto city council, it would have the same effect except amplified, and it could probably affect provincial and federal levels also to have that person there.
Yeah, it seems to me that even if you're someone who thinks that she's too radical, that her policy goals are unrealistic, if you're at all sympathetic to the plight of homeless people and poor people in Vancouver and the housing market situation, you could still want to see her elected just to have that voice on the council. And if you think she's too radical, feeling safe in the notion that, well, she's just one of 10, like obviously she's not the mayor and all 10 city councilors, and it's just like Jean City now. I mean, you and I might not mind that, but yeah, it just seems to me that it's good to have that, like a little bit more of a diversity of perspectives and less of that myopia you were talking about.
And she has got a plan to end homelessness in a year. And
she said there was like 2,000 homeless people in Vancouver, which is like, yes, that's a lot of people, but
yeah,
it's build 5 apartment buildings. Like, it's really not that crazy of an idea.
I think the homeless count was 2,100 something. And then that's also potentially an underestimate because a lot of people don't self-report as homeless, or they're like living on couches or other stuff like that.
Right.
Or a bunch of them are crowded in one suite illegally and things like that.
Yeah.
But she's got a plan costed, where the money is going to come from, how to house the homeless in 1 year, and just be like, Vancouver actually ended homelessness. And when the ruling party, Vision Vancouver, promised that in 2008 and didn't deliver to end homelessness, I think, I don't know, it's fucking awesome. I'm a big fan of the campaign. I'm a big fan of Jean.
Yeah, I hope she wins.
So yeah, if you live in Vancouver, October 14th is voting day, so you can vote for Jean. You can vote for anyone you want, but I'd say Jean's a good option.
There's also this watermelon lady running, and she seems kind of goofy, but she's promising free public transit and saving our dispensaries. I don't know if our dispensaries are under attack. They seem to be going fine.
Yeah.
I think she's somehow involved in selling pot. I was at a movie at the film festival yesterday, and her ad kept playing over and over again, and the guy next to me started laughing, and I was like, why are you laughing? And he was like, you know who she is? And I was like, I don't know. No. He's like, she's a staple on Commercial Drive, like runs a front business. And I shouldn't say this on the podcast because I don't know if any of it's true. But apparently she was selling pot or something. I don't know. She's a pot dealer or something.
Yeah, I remember her selling baked pot goods at Wreck Beach for like years before it was kind of pseudo legal like it is. But I mean, the thing, no disrespect to Watermelon or any of the other candidates. They all just really, really pale in comparison to Jean. I mean, on the issue of dispensaries in Vancouver and protecting them, our provincial government right now has been very, very friendly to dispensaries and has made it clear that as marijuana is being legalized, that they're going to continue being friendly to dispensaries here in this province. Not all provinces are going to be friendly to their existing dispensaries, but BC is. And then also additionally, the free transit thing is like an activist thing that's beyond a city councillor to do. It's also something that's part of Jean's platform, and that Jean has, I think, a more credible route to fighting to move towards free transit.
Does she actually say free too? Because when I heard that, I was like, that sounds a little crazy. Like, yes, cheap. When Mina Wong was running for mayor, she was talking about $40 a month transit passes, which I was like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. It's affordable and like not too much money, but free seems like, well, don't they do have to like pay to keep the transit thing running somehow.
Jean's policy point on that, if I recall correctly, is that it's moving towards a free transit system with an emphasis on low income people. So like in Calgary, they've got a $5 a month pass for low income people where you can use unlimited transit for $5 a month.
Nice.
If you meet the income requirements.
Right.
And I think that would be more the type of thing that Jean would be fighting for based on what I've heard her say.
So yeah, thank you, Jean, for coming on, and Shawn for doing the interview, and you, the listener, for listening.
Yeah, you can find us online at seriously-wrong.com, SRSLYWRONG.com. And if you want to become one of our beautiful genius Patreon subscribers who sends a little money our way every month to make sure that we can keep making the show as high quality as we can, we greatly appreciate that. And to everyone who's already doing that, thank you so much.
You get bonus episodes if you do.
Bonus eppies.
Bonus eppies. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you later.
We're going to ask David Hutniak what he thinks as well when he joins us at 3:45.
The CEO of Landlord BC.
Laura's in Vancouver. Welcome to Steel and Tracks.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'm a landlord and a realtor, and I think the candidate missed the boat on a number of points. Property taxes aren't going to freeze. My monthly maintenance fees won't freeze. And I'm faced right now with putting in a new washing machine into a unit. I haven't raised my rent in 4 years. We're not all scum. We're nice people, and we work really, really hard to have these properties.
If you were forced, Laura, to freeze your rents for 4 years, what would you do?
If someone's making me do something that I'm already voluntarily doing, I'd sell.
So then there's unintended consequences.
Thanks for the call. Donna's in Langley this afternoon. Welcome to Steel and Tracks.
Hi, I'm a landlord, and I can tell you horror story after horror story of tenants that I've had. You cannot get them out. They don't pay their rent. They do massive damage that far exceeds their damage deposit. They lie on their application form. I'm really not happy with what she said about landlords sit back and collect money. You know, that's not how it is at all. And so when they make it an even playing field and I can protect my property and hold my tenants to what they say they do, that they work, that who I rent to is who's going to be living there, I'm fine with that. I have a house in Maple Ridge. I haven't raised the rent on that house in over 5 years because I finally have excellent tenants.
So that's the key. Good tenants equals even more fairness from the landlord. I think she makes a great point. Do you want to get in this last guy?
Yeah, let's
quickly?
get Aaron. Aaron in Langley, you've got 30 seconds here. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I'm a landlord as well, and I agree with pretty much all the other landlords. But not only that, you know what? We have a mortgage to pay. We worked really hard to make ourselves some money, and we want to do an investment property. And, we got to pay the second or third or fourth mortgage as well and pay more every year that we renew.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks, Eric. What do you think about that?
Hi, another landlord here. First, I just want to say I agree with the landlord so far, really on the nose. I was just sitting here twiddling my thumbs waiting for my property value to go up, so I had a little bit of time to call into the show. I got to tell you, there's some horror stories about the way that some of my tenants have been treating their chickens. You know, these chickens are crowded in there. There's no place for these chickens to go. They're asses to elbows in these cages, and the way the tenants think it's all right to treat them that way, it is just despicable. And I think all of us landlords need to come together and fight for the rights of chickens against tenants. Thank you.
You know, that's interesting. We got a lot of landlords.
A lot of great calls too.
Hi, yeah, I'm also a landlord, and I just want to say, yeah, I agree with the other landlords. They seem like they were making some really great points. But one thing that a lot of people don't talk about when you're discussing landlords and landlord rights is that landlords historically have been a group that in some countries have been genocided, murdered, all of them. And, you know, when people are advocating for the rights of oppressed groups who have historically been the victims of genocide, for some reason, landlords never come up. And I don't know. Just seems like a curious silence on the part of so-called anti-oppression activists that they're not talking about the landlords because we've had it rough. Look at history. Read some history books. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm wrong, you're wrong, he's wrong, she's wrong, they're wrong, we're wrong, you're wrong, I am wrong, we are wrong, seriously wrong.
Next time on Seriously Wrong, Jean and candidates like her around the world end the dehumanizing and murderous scourge of poverty and homelessness around the world.